Hello, everybody. My name is Beverly Burnett, and I am a very grateful, recovering member of the Al-Anon family group. And I didn't disappear. I'm like Ollie Dragon from the old Kukla, Fran and Ollie. Now you see me, now you don't. I don't even have words to express the gratitude that I feel for having been given this invitation to join you at the Big Island Bash. And I want to thank Walter and Rhea for offering that invitation to me. And I have had a wonderful experience. And the wonderful part about it is being reunited with Walter and Susan, and also being accompanied by my dear friend Gail. It's been a real pleasure for us to be together. So I just, there's no really, as hard as you try, there are really no words when it comes to expressing love. There are things that, you can say the word love, or you can say the word gratitude, or you can say thank you, or all those things. But each of us have our own definition of what that means inside of us, and it's hard to convey. But this program is the language of love, and we speak to each other heart to heart. And so you have to just know that when I'm telling you that I am feeling extreme gratitude to be here, that I mean it from my heart. So thank you. We have laughed and played and ate and sat at the pool. I'm the only person who sat under an umbrella and got sunburned. And that's the truth. Now, my friend sat out in the sun, and she did not get sunburned, so I don't know how that happened. I am a member of the Friendship Al-Anon family group. I've been a member there for a long time. I started out at the Horizon Al-Anon family group and was a member there for 18 years. I have been in the program since February 9th of 1981, and I've been an active member of my own recovery, of my own home group, and I've given as much as I can to my community and to serve this program because I feel like it saved my life. And I hope I never lose that feeling, because I still live and interact with a lot of people with a lot of ISM. and besides that, it's like this program has given me my own life raft. I had a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body myself. I'm going to tell you a few statistics because they're really important, okay? I'm 70 years old, and I can outrun Susan. My husband and I celebrated 50 years of marriage on 11/11/11. And he's a lucky man. My son is almost 50 years old, and he has 31 years of continuous sobriety. I have 2 golden retriever dogs, Furface and Jake, and they let us, my husband and I, live at the house. And both of my dogs are registered for service work with the Delta Society in Bellevue, Washington. And what we do with those dogs, or what I get to do with those dogs, is I found out when I was 60 years old that I'm dyslexic, very severely dyslexic, and that I have memorized my life. And during that course of time between 1 and 60, I was called dumb and stupid, kneeled on beams, and wore dunce caps. And when I got these dogs registered for service work, we tried a number of things. We went to nursing homes. We worked diligently with the Humane Society for a number of years, and I found my spot at the Flower Mound Public Library in a program called Sit, Stay, Read. And every Tuesday afternoon at 3:30, I take those 2 boys to the library, and we have dyslexic children that read to the dogs. And that just fills my heart. So I have 3 granddaughters, and I have a full life. And it's very different from the life that I had before I came to Al-Anon. I was isolated. I was afraid. It was like our pamphlet, Understanding Ourselves, says, that we were lonely and angry and unwanted and unloved and felt that way. And that's the way that I was before I got here. And I have a life today that I was talking to my husband on the phone today, and I said to him, I have a life that's beyond anything I could ever imagine. And he says, and then you have to come home on Monday. So anyhow, because my heart pounds when I first start to talk and before God kicks in. By the way, I also got 2 new eyes, but I can't see the book. And the tent is lovely. The tent is absolutely lovely. I think it has one of the warmest atmospheres of anywhere that I have ever talked. And so I think, God makes the best of a bad situation. And this really, this is God's handiwork. And I know the hotel and a lot of people and the committee and everything. But, a seemingly bad thing turned out to be something absolutely glorious. So I want to just thank you for all your hard work. So, anyhow, with my new eyes and a pair of glasses, I'm going to read to you. This is out of this little book, and mine is an original copy, and it's falling apart. And it says, after many years of covering up George's illness and making excuses for his behavior, I was relieved to be in the company of people who accepted me as I was. And I realized that I could not control the alcoholic's actions. They saw qualities in me that I had, and I realized that I could not, they saw qualities in me that I had ignored for years and helped me to give myself credit for my positive attributes. They welcomed me into the group. I was inspired by the strength that some people showed in times of crisis, and I was awed by the caring and love that people shared with me. After so many years of feeling helpless and worthless, I was in a group that not only accepted me as I was, but helped me to become the lady that I had always wanted to be. They taught me that I could not love and help others until I felt loved and secure myself. Today, with the help of my higher power and the fellowship of Al-Anon, I am often able to share that love and support with others who need it. And before I start my talk, this love thing has really impacted me. I think myself and many others of us that sit in the room don't really know, as we begin to recover, that we are capable of love. And about 4 years ago, I began to sponsor a lady in Greeley, Colorado. And in November of 2011, she was diagnosed with cancer. And on January 31st, she died. And it was very sudden and very quick. And what I realized is that I went through a grieving process when Joey died. And I realized for the first time that I was really capable of love. And so my sponsee gave me a gift in her death that I'll remember forever. And it opened my eyes to a quality that I didn't know that I was capable of at that depth. We say, I love you, but I know that I am capable of a great capacity of love today, and I thank Joey so much for that. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. I've lived in Texas 35, almost 36 years, but they don't ever let you be a Texan. They always call you a northerner. And they're very happy if you just go back where you came from. So I was born in Chicago, Illinois, in the Czechoslovakian Polish neighborhood, and I believe today that my father was the alcoholic. And I know that we're not supposed to call anybody an alcoholic until they've stood up at the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous and got a chip. But I'm going to tell you a little story. My father was dying of multiple myeloma, and he came to live with me for the last 2 years of his life. And we had come home on a September afternoon from a chemotherapy or a radiation treatment. And I got him settled in his chair, and I opened up a magazine to a page that had a frosty glass and a tomato and everything else in it. And I said to my dad, "Oh my God, Daddy, doesn't that look good?" And he said, Pigeon, ever since I've been on morphine, I haven't wanted to drink. So I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure I came from an alcoholic family. My father drank and my mother got crazy. And, in my opinion, I would look at that and I'd think to myself, I don't ever want to do that. I don't ever want to behave like that. I don't ever want to be like that. It's just, I had thoughts from the time that I was a little girl until, way into my teens, if I ever get married and if I ever have children, I will not treat my family like this. And I never knew how it was going to be. I never knew if it was going to be a good day or if I never knew if she was going to be off a little, because I always knew what my father was going to be like, but I was never sure about my mother's behavior. And I never knew if it was going to be a good day or if, and she'd kiss me goodbye and tell me, have a good day at school, or if it would be a bad day and she would grab the cat of nine tails and just beat the snot out of me. And I never knew which day was which. And I wish I could tell you that I felt responsible for that. I had no clue. I had no idea what was going on. It went on all my life. I thought it was just normal. And then I started to go to other people's houses, and I realized, that there was a difference in the way that other people lived compared to the way that we lived. And there's a book in Al-Anon called From Survival to Recovery, and I believe that the first 11 pages of that book kind of describe what it was like. And I related so much to the words that were put on those pages. But I just never knew, and I never understood, why our house was always so restless, always so irritable, and always so discontent. It just wasn't ever the way the neighbors were. My mom, you could hear her screaming down the block. I really would feel some sense of embarrassment or humiliation about that, and I wished it was different, but oh well, it wasn't. So, my mom and my dad went to work every day. We did not suffer from, deprivation. We had electric, we had food. My parents were coming out of the Depression. God certainly was, or the money God was the God in the family. And, they were just trying to survive and make a better life. And it was fun. My father drank in the corner tavern. He drank in the garage that belonged to the guy next door. And they were building a boat back there, and there was always a galvanized tub of beer and a block of ice and an ice pick in there. And it was just fun for the kids to go in there and pick at the ice. And, beer was in bottles back then. And, it was fun. I always wanted to be in the garage. I didn't want to be in the house with her. There was always more fun, but kids weren't allowed in the garage while they were building the boat. So, there was always this, I wanted to be with him. He was a lot of fun. My mom knew that if we moved out of Chicago and got into the suburbs, that life would be better. So I learned early on about geographics. And so finally the day came, she was tired of the drunken uncles. She was tired of my dad's brother, his cousins, and all the drinking and everything. And she knew if we moved to Westmont, it was all going to get better. But what she didn't know that I learned in Al-Anon is that alcoholism is a progressive disease and you cannot outrun it. And, she was trying to outrun whatever it was that was going on. I'm pretty sure my mother was raised in alcoholism, and I'm pretty sure my father was raised in alcoholism, and I think my mother was just trying to outrun the illness. So eventually, my dad's brother lived on 26th Street in doorways and in gutters. And so my vision of alcoholism was the trench coat and the nicotine-stained fingernails that would grow over my Uncle Jimmy's fingers. And somebody would call from 26th Street and say, Jimmy's really bad, and my dad would go get him, and my mother literally would Clorox him and cut his fingernails, and they'd give him a clean set of clothes, and they'd take him to the VA hospital. And they didn't do that once or twice. They did it over and over and over until she was just so tired of it. She knew moving to Westmont would fix it. So we moved to Westmont, and alcoholism followed us there, and she knew that getting away from that would be better. But then my father became post commander of the VFW, and the party was on, and she just couldn't figure that one out. She was so upset about that. So that was our life. I had a brother and a sister, and eventually my father got a position, and we moved to Ogden, Utah, and she absolutely knew that if we moved to Utah, it was all going to be better. So my father set out for the new position 3 months before we did. We took a train ride. It was this big adventure, and we got off the train, and she was ready to start a new life that was way different from what we had before. And the bottom line is we packed up alcoholism, We took it with us. My father met the train drunk, and the fight was on. And I didn't have any youth center to go to, no American Bandstand, no friends, no anything. I had to sit there and just really literally endure what was going on in that house, and it was horrible. I look back at it now and I say to myself, it's the worst summer of my life. There was a lot of game playing, running around and all this. And, I don't have to explain active alcoholism because you've all been there and you know how it feels. And this is a feeling illness, and so you know how that feels. And eventually I turned 18 years old, and my father got me a job at the place where he worked, and I was so glad to get out of that house. And I had a little position in a blueprint island, and it was like a little library, and the engineers would check the blueprints out. And one day I'm sitting there, and I don't know if I was there a week or a month, or it wasn't very long, and this guy came in, and oh my God, you should have seen him. Oh my God, I was a product of American Bandstand, crew cuts, ducktails, poodle skirts, saddle shoes, and I know most of you in this room don't even know what I'm talking about, but we watched it on a round black and white television. So I had this lust for a crew cut. I had a lust for a ducktail. I didn't care who was wearing it. I was just, it was this requirement. And so I'm in my little place one day, and in comes this guy with a crew cut and a ducktail. And I looked at him and I thought, oh my God, that is mine. Now, I was 18 years old. I was totally naive, totally inexperienced. And I looked at that crew cut and I fell in love. Or something. I don't know about alcoholics, but Al-Anons can plan life in about 30 seconds, and I had our life planned out. We were going to live happily ever after, and I didn't even know his name. All I knew is he had a crew cut and a ducktail, and he smoked cigarettes. And, that was sexy back then. It's not so sexy today, I'll tell you. When you suffer the consequences of that some 50 years later, it's not so funny. But he was just absolutely adorable. And I thought if he had the sport coat and he had a tie and he had a job, he looked like he was older. What more could I ask for? He wasn't going to go off to the military and leave me alone. I mean, I had it planned out, and I only had laid my eyes on him. So I watched him come in and out of the office, and there was a lot of drama around him. He was newly married, I found out, and a couple of weeks after I first laid eyes on him, he was sleeping in a cot in his office, and his clothes were hanging on a pipe. And they said, oh, poor George. Well, then he came back, and they said, oh, Georgie's back with his wife. And then he was back on the cot. And I was thinking to myself, every time he was on the cot, it was like, yes, I had a chance. The worse it got, I just had this vision that the worse his life got, the better it was for me because I had a chance. And then I had this other crazy thought that I could make him happy. Now, I don't know where you get that thought. When you're a kid that's been raised up in active alcoholism, and, I only experienced two things, anger and pain. And I'm thinking, I can make that guy happy. I didn't know for sure. I had no idea what that meant. But time went on, and he was in and out, and clothes, and, office, pipe, back in the big bed, all this. And one day he comes in the office, and he brushed up against me, and he said, I am officially separated from my wife, and I would like to take you out on a date. And he came and picked me up on Friday night. I introduced him to my mom and my dad, and I think alcoholics have a marking that only they can see, and my dad spotted him, and it was like he grabbed him and said, let's go have a drink. Now, he didn't know whether the guy drank or not, but he just grabbed him, and I heard laughter and glasses clinking, and all I'm thinking is, thank God my dad likes him. So by the time we went out on our first date, my husband was half in the bag. And on the date, he finished the job, and when we got home and he dropped me off at the front door, all I was thinking is, he just kissed me goodnight, everything's going to be okay. And he, they have to kiss you the way they drive, cover one eye, I suppose. I don't know how that all works out. I've never had double vision, thank you, God. But he missed. And he got the doorbell, and she came out like a bolt of lightning, And he jumped in that Oldsmobile, and it was, all you could see was this red line of lights going down 3rd Street. And I thought, oh my God, I'll never see him again. Well, that was not to be the truth. So we dated for a year and a week. And really, I'm not going to tell you much more than that because it explains alcoholism. He often didn't show up for dates. What I know today from what I learned from you is that when he took a drink, the drink took a drink, and the drink took the man. And he lost the ability to choose, and it didn't matter how much he loved me or how badly he wanted to be at my front door at 7 o'clock sharp. Once he went to the keg and he had a beer, he had no choice. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. And I thought if I changed the color of my hair, or I bought, different clothes, or I lost 10 or 15 pounds, or if my mother just wouldn't look at him when he walked in the door, maybe she looked at him funny, I don't know. But I was always thinking there was something wrong with the outside, and if I could fix something on the outside, he would be able to come home, he would be able to come from the keg, be at my house at 7 o'clock and pick me up. But the next thing that would happen, he'd call me the next day and he would say to me, I am so sorry I didn't pick you up last night. I don't know what happened. And do you know what I know today? Is that he did not know what happened. But I didn't know back then that he didn't know, and I took it real personal. But then he said those magic words, it'll never happen again. I promise, Beverly, it'll never happen again. And it didn't happen just once or twice. It happened over and over and over in the year and the week that we dated. And every time it happened, I never even considered the fact that he might be alcoholic, or there might be something, maybe he had a flat tire, or maybe something, he had to work late. There was always something wrong with me that I was trying to fix. So we ended up getting married. We went on a 2-day honeymoon. I got pregnant on that honeymoon. In 2 days, I had birth control pills in my purse. I didn't know you were supposed to put them in your mouth. So now I am pregnant. And the second day we were married, or the third day we were married, was a Monday. We went off to work, and when it came time to come home, I fixed a little dinner, and he didn't show up. And I called him at work, and I said, when are you coming home? And he says, I'll be there in a little while, honey. And I says, okay. So I stirred the pot. About a half hour later, I called him again, and I says, when are you coming home? I'll be there in a while, honey. And I stirred the pot. And then I called the third time, and the whole thing changed. He says, I'll be there in a damn minute, and don't call me again. And I thought I had dialed the wrong number. How could this happen? We got married on Saturday, and this is how he's talking to me on Monday. And everything inside of me just sunk. And I don't know for sure, but I'm sure that somewhere inside of me I thought, oh no, not again. How could this be happening again? But I didn't know what it was that was happening again. So the baby came along, and I was ill-equipped to take care of a child. And although I was trying to fulfill my promises in being a good mother, I was truly incapable emotionally of taking care of a child. I could take care of a child physically. I could not take care of a child emotionally. And I taught him nursery rhymes, and I fed him his dinner, and I put him to bed on time. But I was not there. I can tell you that right now. I wasn't there until sometime after February of 1981. I did not know how to do it without you, and I'm still learning today. That's one of the reasons I continue to go back to Al-Anon day after day, month after month, year after year, because for one thing, I forget what I know, and I never know when I'm going to have this spiritual awakening. I never know. I was at a convention about 5 years ago in Montana, and they invited me to go to an Al-Anon meeting before the convention started, and I went. And they were reading the opening. And I had been really having trouble with my husband's illness and taking that personally. He has COPD. And I was taking a lot of that personally, and I'm thinking, I was reacting to it and responding to it and defending myself to it and arguing with him about it. And I had no idea it had to do with oxygen saturation and oxygen and all those other things. And so I got myself in a state where I was responding to COPD the way I used to respond to alcoholism. And we're sitting in this meeting in Montana, and they read, once you place your problem in its true perspective, we find it loses its power to dominate our thoughts and our lives. And I had a spiritual awakening sitting in there, and the tears just rolled down my cheeks. And I thought, I have not been able to put this particular problem in its right perspective, and I've allowed it to dominate my thoughts and my life. And I went home and began a series of changes, not by my own doing, but because my reliance and my belief on God, and because I work the steps, and because I go to meetings, and because my ears are open, I get to hear these messages. So I don't want to miss anything. So I keep going back, because those are the kinds of things that happen. But I didn't know then. I had no instruction when I was raising up these children. 2 years after our first child was born, our second child was born, and I did the very best I could with the light I had to see by, and it was pretty dim. It was pretty dim. And I screamed and yelled and hollered and did a lot of things that I promised myself I would never do, but I didn't know how to do it any different. My husband went up the corporate ladder. We left Utah. We went to Pennsylvania, and then on to New Jersey. And almost 36 years ago, we moved to Texas, and we live in the same house we bought that day. Alcoholism is a progressive disease, and by the time we moved to Texas, our sons, who were at that time 14 and 16 years old, were full-blown drug addicts and alcoholics, and I had no idea that they had started the alcohol when we were living in Sparta, New Jersey, at Lake Mohawk. And I had no idea what they were doing down there at the beach, and they started the career of alcoholism down there. So in order for two kids, 14 and 16 years old, to have enough money to support themselves in drugs and alcohol and parties and whatever, they steal your stuff. They steal all your stuff, and they don't care what stuff it is. They just take it and they sell it, or they take it and they give it away, or they take it and they trade it. And I would just be looking around my house, and I would see something that was gone, and I knew I had it, and I would go to one, and I'd say, "What happened to that?" And he'd go, "Well, I don't know, Mom." "Why don't you ask Scott? He probably knows." "What happened to that, Scott?" "I don't know." "Did you ask Steve?" "Yeah, I asked Steve." "Wow, I don't know, Mom." Well, this went on over and over. They were taking parts off our ceiling fans. They cut my husband's golf clubs off. Come to find out, they were really serious bong makers. There were little dishes that had burn holes in them. Nobody ever knew how anything happened. There would be tobacco and stuff spit in my sink, and the cat would be stoned, but I didn't know the cat was stoned. There was just, a lot of really interesting stuff going on. And finally one day I asked one where something was, and he goes, "I don't know, Mom." Asked the other one, and I asked the other one, and he goes to me, "Mom, I don't know. There is something seriously wrong with you. I think you need help, Mom. You keep seeing things in this house that do not exist." Well, at that moment, they didn't exist, but they used to exist. And I was trying to explain all this stuff. And they're just standing there, with big black eyes looking at me, like this. And I had no idea. I was trying to feed them good food. They wanted to eat picante sauce and corn chips. Their whole demeanor changed. They fried their hair, and they wore earrings and holy jeans and titty shoes and ball caps on backwards, and their bedrooms became really dirty, and they became two kids right in front of my eyes that I didn't even recognize. And one day they came home. I was so not a part of their life by this time. They were hiding from me, coming home late, not following rules. I was just screaming. I was a mess. And, I'm trying to get my husband to come home for dinner. I'm still working on that. 21 years later, I'm still working on getting him home. And it's not working, and he's calling me worse names now, and I'm believing him. And in the ODAP book, it says, "If they call you a tree, are you a tree?" It took me a lot of years in recovery to stop believing that I was those names that he called me when he was drunk. So I have these kids, and I'm not a part of their life, and I don't know what's going on, and they bring me a little bag of seeds. And they said, "Would you help us with a science project?" And I said I would be most happy to. So I got 10 flower pots and Miracle Grow potting soil. And I planted the mystery seeds in my bedroom window and gave them southern exposure and covered them with saran wrap and created little greenhouse effect for them. And I came home from work every day, and I make sure that I watered them and let the sun shine on them. And the little boys were watching it all, and they were growing huge, and the leaves were big and dark green, and I said to them, we have hybrid marigolds. Now, in Texas, a lot of the cowboys put stickers on their bumper of their pickup trucks that say native. But then I couldn't see very well in it, but it did say Texan, but I could never see the Texan. I could just see native. Well, I'm dyslexic, and I kept looking at that over the years, thinking it said naive. And one day I was stopped at a stoplight going to work, and I went Native. That's not naive, that's native. Duh. Well, I need a bumper sticker that says naive, because I'm in there growing all this stuff thinking we have hybrid marigolds. And the little boys are coming in and out, and I'm baking cookies and serving Kool-Aid. One day I came home from work, and the plants were gone, and the pots were there, and I thought the cats ate them. And I was going to run off to the school and explain this to the teacher, and I didn't, thank God, because it was 7 o'clock at night, and it would have been all, everything locked down. But I thought, okay, I'll take off Monday, take a breath. I'll go to the school on Monday. I'll explain to them that for the last 6 weeks, we actually have grown the project. And I went to put some laundry away in my young son's closet, and the mystery seeds were thumbtacked in there. Now, I also had a very white-hot anger, rage, and it went from 0 to kill in 10 seconds or less. And that went away after an episode and a lot of work with a sponsor in April of 2000. So it takes time. The things that are, the defects of character that we have, they take time. And I used to always think, it has to get better. But I had a sponsor, her name was Gracie, and she always used to tell me, Beverly, it's progress, not perfection. You have to celebrate the things that are changing in you. And when God's ready, he'll change the things that need to be changed. When you're ready to accept him and appreciate the change, it's not going to happen all today. And so most of the time, I had this feeling of impatience. I wanted it all to be gone. And now I think to myself, I wonder what God is going to do for me next. And I'm always surprised, because usually I look at it and I think to myself, I didn't know I was fearful, or I didn't know I had a problem with money, or whatever it is. And so I'm surprised by it today, but grateful that God has taken the time. Because another thing I want you to know, in case any of you have the wrong idea, I am God's favorite child. I am spoiled rotten, and I love it that way. And I'm glad, because I came here with an idea that there was no God. I will have nothing to do with God. I followed a church all my life by myself. I went to every Bible study that was open. I went to every summer youth, anything that had to do with church, I went until it was time to marry my husband. And when I went to see the person who was in charge of the church, he told me that I couldn't get married there, and I threw it all away. I thought, to heck with it. I have been to the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Bible Church. I know every Bible verse there is. I've got a bazillion stars, and I can't get married in a church. And so I got married in my living room by a justice of the peace, and it works, apparently. But I threw it all away that day, and I said, I will never, ever. So I was on self-will without any belief or trust in God. The only person I believed and trusted in was myself. And so transitioning over the years to believe in a power greater than myself, to become willing to believe that there is a God, and then to become willing to believe that I'm God's favorite child, I have come a long way in the years that I've been involved in Al-Anon. And so time went on, and the alcoholism progressed. I did not go to the school. And I think today one of the major things is that I believe that in this room we are all sitting here because somebody came and got us. Whether we made a phone call, or we read an article in a magazine, or we saw something in a bus in Seattle, all of the public bus system says if somebody's drinking bothers you, call this number. I never saw any of that stuff. I had no idea about Al-Anon, and my God came and got me. And he came and got me through a lady that I worked with at the bank. And she had been missing for about 3 days, and when she came back, I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah." She told me that her son had almost died of alcoholism over the weekend, and that it was touch and go for a while, but he pulled through, and they put him in an ambulance, and they took him up to Denton to a place called Westgate. and that he was going to be there for 28 days. And I promise you, I heard her say that when he gets out after 28 days, he's not going to have alcoholism anymore. But while Margaret was telling me, I asked her a few questions. I says, what does it look like? What do the kids do? You know, what did he look like? What was he doing? And as she was explaining some of those things to me, I had the moment where I could see my life in its reality, exactly the way it was. The mystery seeds, marking the bottles, all of those stolen things that I swore I had, but they promised me that I didn't have. My whole life in a little moment opened up, and I could see it for what it was, and it slammed shut just that fast. But I had the sense to say to Margaret, I think we might have a problem at our house. And I said, give me the phone number to this place in Denton. So I made the phone call. We went up there. And we interviewed with the staff, and they said they were sure that somebody in the family had alcoholism, but they didn't know who. They sent us home, and they said, when you find out who really has the alcoholism, call us back and let us know. And I was really offended by that, because by that time I had quit drinking completely. You know, I'd have a little glass of wine, or I'm one of those people that annoy most of the alcoholics in this room. As soon as I started to feel it, I was done. I was out of control. I have to be in control. So, I was really offended when she suspicioned that maybe I could be an alcoholic. But I also was told that the Al-Anon comes into the program much sicker than the alcoholic, and I am here to tell you that that was true in my case. So we went home, and that was somewhere around the end of January of 1981. And on the 9th day of February, my son took something that I knew I had, and I confronted him by running to the bus stop in my pajamas and calling my son names that no mother should ever call her child. And my son turned around and he looked at me and he says, go home, Mom, you're embarrassing me. So we did that. I went home. I called in sick to work. A few minutes later, he called me from school, and he said, if you come and get me, I'll go into treatment. And the reason he wanted to go into treatment was because the kid he was robbing houses with that weekend was in the Denton County Jail, and he knew he was next. So his motive for coming into Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't pure. When I dropped him off at the treatment center, she said, you can't come and see him unless you go to Al-Anon. And I says, I work. And she says, well, so do we. So you can't come back here and see him if you don't go to Al-Anon. And I thought to myself, sister, I'm paying the bill here. You know, you're not going to tell me what to do. So I had a little bit of an attitude. And so I went to Al-Anon to spite the counselor in the treatment center. And by the time my son came out of the treatment center on the 8th day of March of 1981, I was going to anywhere between 8 and 11 meetings of Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous a week. And most of them were in Dallas. We got acquainted with the Alpha group. I was given a big book by somebody who said, chances are when that boy comes, you know, he's only 16 years old, 15 and a half years old, chances are he won't stay sober. You better read this book because it's the only description of the alcoholic. You go to open meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and you listen to the stories of the alcoholics, and you're going to come to a place where you have to understand that it was not about you, that you are suffering, you know, in the part of the family disease, but that is not about you. And so I read the big book. I went to meetings with my husband for about 5 years at the Primary Purpose Group. We started a group down there, and I went for 5 years on Tuesday, and we read the big book exactly the way it's written and talked about it. And after about 5 years, we stopped doing that, but I became a student of the big book, and I began to understand alcoholism in a way that I think people who are deeply affected by this disease need to know, need to understand it. I was going to a lot of Al-Anon meetings. I was going to day meetings. I was going to night meetings. And my young son did not stay sober, but on the 30th day of March, we were going to a meeting at the Alpha Group, and I saw that my older son was really drunk. The next day, through a series of situations, we did end up taking him to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he got his sponsor that night, and he has been sober ever since. The sponsor was, my son's sponsor is the one who told me to get a sponsor because he told me I was interfering in Stephen's sobriety. He was trying to do something nice for somebody and not be found out, and I was saying, "Oh, Steve, you emptied the dishwasher. How nice." Well, I mean, it was surprised. They had never done that before. But on the other hand, I had never allowed them to grow up. I had never allowed them to touch, the washing machine, to learn how to sort clothes, to learn how to scramble an egg. I never taught them any of those things because I didn't want them to dirty my kitchen, and I would be out of control. So I crippled my children, and I didn't know it. I'm thinking I'm being helpful. I never taught them how to make a bed because I could make it better. And then all of a sudden, Bobby's saying, "You have to learn to cook. You have to learn to sort your clothes. You have to learn to take the garbage out. You have to learn to cut the grass." And I had to learn how to let those things go, and I didn't know how. And one day, my friend Billy, we were at a family afterward meeting on a Saturday night, and I don't know what the topic was that night. It was always out of the big book, in the family afterward. And one night after the meeting, she said to me, "Beverly, supposing you died tomorrow, would any one of those three boys be able to, your husband, would they be able to take care? Does your husband know what bills you pay? Does he know where the accounts are? Does he know, what needs to be paid every month?" The fact of the matter is he did not. It was my job. And she said, "You have to start to surrender some of those things," because she said, if you don't let go, they can't grow. And if you don't let go, you can't grow. She said, "You don't even know who you are. You are what you do." And I didn't even understand what she was telling me. I am what I do. She said, "You have to become." And so from that point on, I scratched my head and I'm like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to become. I'm his wife. I'm his mother. I cook these recipes. I paint. I wash cars. I wax. I do all this stuff. But I'm a doer. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know who I was. And so it went on. I started to go to women's conferences and sleep with women in bunkhouses and learn about how to put on makeup and what you guys wore under your T-shirts. And that was interesting. I found out I would hide in showers and think I was the only one with hail damage. Well, I'm here to tell you we all have it. But I grew, and I continued to grow, and I grew, and I grew, and I grew. And in the 8th year, I got my father, and he was dying of multiple myeloma, and I was still going to all these meetings and going off to conferences and just, women's conferences, AA conferences. We were the Brazos Riverside, everything. I mean, we were so hungry for recovery. We couldn't get enough of it. And I mean, it's like my whole life was built around Al-Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was happier than I'd ever been in my life. And, happiness is something that doesn't mean it's trouble-free. I have had my share of troubles. But in the beginning, I thought, we're off on this little pink cloud. And I thought, everything's going to always be wonderful for the rest of my life. And I am here to tell you that life continues to happen, whether you're in recovery or not. But the magical, wonderful thing about being in recovery is that we're surrounded by each other. And we never have to walk through anything alone. We always have each other to get us through the very worst and the very best. We celebrate our tragedies and we celebrate our joy here. And that's the wonderful part for me, is that I don't ever have to do anything alone. So Bobby got me a telephone number, told me to ask Sally to be my sponsor, and I did that. And then we had a discussion about him taking Stephen to the 24-hour club for the candlelight meeting on Saturday night at midnight. Can you imagine taking your baby son to such a place on a Saturday night? And he came to my house and he poked I swear his finger was that long, poked it in my chest, and he said, "You know what, Beverly? If he doesn't stay sober, he's going to be a resident there if he's lucky." Whoa. So I was, okay, we'll have fun. So I had to learn to let go and let God. In the meanwhile, the young son did not stay sober, and when he was 17 and a half years old, I found it necessary to put him out of my house, and he never lived with me again. And I'll tell you what, that is where you begin to grow. When I put him out in the street, he lived with people and in places that you don't ever want your child to live. But I was told, and I believed you, that he could not bring the drugs and the alcohol into a sober home. I was taught by that time that my home was a privilege. I didn't know that. I thought if I gave birth to them, they could punch holes in my walls and call me names. And Bobby said to me, no, Beverly, your house is a privilege, and they don't deserve to live there if they don't live there sober and respectful. And I had to put him out because I grew to a place where I knew that Bobby was right. But in the meantime, I had been in the fellowship. Up until that point, I was in the fellowship, going to conferences, going to coffee, being invited to sit at a table with you people. Oh my God, it was such a privilege. Our social life had boiled down to this. Absolutely zero. I couldn't handle it. It was too much drinking, too much fighting in the end. And so I stopped going anywhere. I shopped at the grocery store at 5 o'clock in the morning because I thought I had control over the fighting that was going on. And here all of a sudden we are open up to going out for coffee and having fun with all of these people who are laughing at the things that brought me heartache and that I'd been crying about all these years. And so, the time came when I got my dad, and when I put this kid out, and I was in all this fellowship, and I came to a place where I heard somebody say, you can be in the fellowship, but you have to be in the program. And I thought about that for a while, and I thought, what's the difference between being in the fellowship and being in the program? And the difference is that I needed to be working all 12 steps of Al-Anon, and I needed to be focusing on the traditions and applying those to my life. And I started out on a pursuit of applying the steps to my life, and my life began to change, and I was able to let go of some really hideous situations. I was able to tell that son, you can call me, but you can't tell me anything about your life. If anything tragic, because I said, what happens to me is I put that down in my mother's heart and I can't sleep at night. And so I learned from you how to draw that line, to not allow that pain to come in. Just call me and let me know you're alive. That's all. And he learned through me that I learned that I could love the alcoholic and hate the disease. And my son knew that. And time went on and he got married. The older boy is going off. I mean, he was like president of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was in Icky Paw, Yucky Paw, Big Book Studies, 24-hour club. He was here, he was there. And, Bobby's calling him. And I heard my oldest son say his first sober prayer. And it said, I heard it through my bedroom wall. And he says, God, Bobby told me to tell you that I would be grateful for a day of sobriety. And you know what? I didn't know that was going to be 31 years later, that I would be grateful that I heard that prayer that day. And so I watched him go off. He ended up through doing a 4th step, going off to college, and he was afraid of failure. And Bobby encouraged him through the 4th step to go to Brookhaven. He graduated from Brookhaven, and he went to 5 semesters of Texas A&M University. And my husband and I had the privilege of sitting in the auditorium one day and watching this kid who walked into his first AA meeting in a pair of titty shoes, holy jeans, fried hair, a Coors hat, and a tequila T-shirt, walk across the stage of Texas A&M, and he had a degree in his hand. And these things are just magical. They're just, how do you get from here to there? How do I get from sitting isolated in a bedroom knitting sweaters to a woman who's had experiences beyond anything I could have ever dreamed possible? And so while my older son's life was taking off, the young son was continuing to drink and drug. He went to a second treatment center. He stayed sober maybe a month. And then we ended up putting him out when he was 17 and a half years old. Sometime after that, he met a young lady that he had gone to high school with. He was a dropout. And they ended up dating for a while, and they were in alcoholism and drug addiction together. And in 1985, they got married. In 1988, they gave birth to a little girl that I didn't think that they should even have conceived, because alcoholism and drug addiction were absolutely rampant in their lives. And I had learned how to detach with love. I had learned the things, and it doesn't mean that it's easy. I can detach from my neighbors, but when you're trying to detach from your children, it is a whole different story. So they're living in Florida. They've got this little girl, and when she was 6 months old, my son went into the hospital for what they thought was acute bronchitis. And when he came out, it was with a diagnosis that he was in full-blown AIDS. And they told him he had less than a year to live. It ended up through whatever primitive medications that they had, that he lived for 5 years. He died in February of 1993, and on February 9th, his original sobriety date, it turned out, was his memorial service. And our little granddaughter was 4 years old, and she stood on a chair at his memorial service, and she told everybody that she thanked them for coming to her daddy's party. And my husband said to me, you know what, why don't you tell her to kind of not be saying that? And the fact of the matter is that it was a celebration, because my son's alcoholism, he had a mother in Al-Anon, a brother that was sober, a father that was sober. My son and my husband did a 12-step call on my sister's husband, and he has 30 years of sobriety. The boy that we used to physically throw out of our house because we knew he was the cause of all of our problems did a little talk at my son's memorial service with 7 years of sobriety. And so those were, his life was to be celebrated, because his alcoholism brought a family into this program of recovery. And time went on. The 5 years that followed my son's death were absolutely horrible. My husband and I damaged our relationship more in the 5 years going through grief than we ever did in active alcoholism. And it came to a point where we had to make a decision whether we even wanted to live together, whether we cared about each other anymore. And we didn't really want to be a statistic. They said 75% of people who lose a child also lose the marriage, and we didn't really want that, but we didn't know how to dig ourselves out of the hole that we were in. And in the meanwhile, we had bought our first golden retriever, because Sarah, we thought it would be great for the baby. And so here we had this dog, and we had this wonderful backyard. And one day I woke up and I thought, if you get divorced, the dog won't have a yard. And so I am with my husband today so that Logan had a yard. But it was a starting point. You need a place to start. You have to make some kind of a small decision, and you work your way up from there. My husband and I have worked together in a business that we created almost 30 years ago, and we're in, I can't even call it semi-retirement. We have a few jobs left that we're still doing, but I'm grieving that. It's been a wonderful run that we've had, and it's very sad because we got to work with you, and it's been a wonderful thing. My husband has an illness, and it's been an opportunity for me to grow spiritually through that, because when his oxygen is down, his thinking is distorted, and he tries to force a solution, and I don't like that. And so I have learned to keep my mouth shut, mind my own business, don't ask questions, don't defend myself, and be kind. And if I can apply those principles to my life, we continue to be okay, during the times when oxygen goes up and down. Our oldest son, after 14 years or 13 years of marriage, was suddenly faced with divorce. And that was a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching situation. And I watched my son. I never thought for 1 minute that he would take a drink, but I was not ever sure for a little period of time that he wouldn't take his life. In a matter of a few hours, he lost his children, his financial security, his home, and his wife. And he was devastated. And I watched him go through the grief process, and there's really nothing that you can do. There is no book written, no matter what kind of degrees you have or anything, there is no book written that will help you get through the grief process. It's a solo journey between you and God, and you go into the belly of the whale, and you stay there for as long as it takes. And when you get out, you're a new person in a foreign land, and you start all over from where you're at. And that's what happened to me. It took almost 5 years for me to come out of the grief process. And I don't remember a lot during that period of time. It was just kind of a lost period of time. I functioned. Everybody thought I was doing okay, but I wasn't really. So I have had to walk through a lot of difficulties. And the only way that I can get through that is to go to meetings, talk to my sponsor, work the 12 steps, apply the traditions, and know that everything has a beginning, a middle, an end, and this too shall pass. This too won't last. And that's kind of how I live my life. I spend every morning, no matter what, in at least anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of prayer and meditation. I write in a journal. I have every day for over 31 years, so I use the tools that are available to me. And, the end result is that I get a life that I love that's worth living today. I'm not that person anymore. And I sponsor people, and I have a sponsor, and I go to meetings, and my life is different. And I appreciate you all being here. I am grateful for Al-Anon. I am grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I am grateful for the sobriety that I have in my home and all of the gifts that I've been giving, and especially to be a part of this year's Big Island Bash. Thank you.